got to do more cleanup. So that's how I feel about the HR lady. I may go on and check her out and just see a little bit more about what she's saying. Because she's friends with Lucy, I do want to see what she's trying to say. But I'm like, Tony, don't come in my office unless you're ready to fix the problem. Okay.
There we go. But you want to know what, George? Your organization is HR done right. So you're doing it right. But the fact of the matter is there are so many who are doing it wrong. So Lucy, even if you have a HR department that's doing it right, or whether they are doing it wrong, give us some steps. Give us maybe 3 ideas that can empower a person to equip HR when there is trouble afoot.
Yeah, equip HR or equip the person?
Well, actually, in equipping the person, you're going to equip the HR department to advocate on your behalf. And the reason why I phrased the question that way is if the HR's department's job is truly to defend the company, and then you realize that something is being done to you that will ultimately harm the company, if you collect the proper evidence, then you are actually empowering HR to ultimately defend, protect the company from the internal predator. Okay. So, or the internal practice that is causing harm to the organization, even though it might be satisfying someone, it is not you who have noticed the problem who's causing the problem. It is the problem itself. And so from your perspective, you might say defend the person, but I'm going to say the health of the organization is ultimately the health of the person as well.
So I'm going to address the tips I have, but before going into that, I just want to make sure that anyone that's listening that doesn't have had the amazing experiences with HR or hasn't had amazing experiences with companies. I mean, we saw literally Pinterest story just come out and how ridiculous that is. So I just want to address that point that we're not going to always get Georges. We're not always going to get Tonys. So I think it's important as an individual, as a person that's underrepresented in your organization, to advocate for yourself. And of course, do your job, stay on the path of your career and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, keep in mind that you're the one that's going to advocate for yourself. And I want to repeat my point of HR responsibilities to manage risk and to think about the Pinterest story. I mean, 2 Black women got 1 year severance check. How much of a risk management was that? I mean, it was managed, I guess. And then there is another white woman that gets 2.2 million. How many million? Sorry. Exactly.
You're right.
So, I mean, the risk was managed. And of course, the HR person is not the one that decides the settlement, but the HR person is the starting point. So I just want to make it clear that you're not always going to have the best experiences, and you need to advocate for yourself. So from that point, my tips are, if you are underrepresented, let's say you are the only person with disabilities in the organization, find someone that's a person of color. If you're the only person of color, find the only LGBTQ community member, make those friendships with other people that are underrepresented in your same organization. And this is how work groups get started, which eventually turn into employee resource groups. And that's when the power starts going to the underrepresented groups, which now all together are not necessarily underrepresented because they have power. And can actually have a cool voice in the organization, and can go back to HR or their DEI person and say, this is what the organization needs. This is the stuff that we've seen. And if you're somebody in the organization that doesn't see your CEO at all and you can't voice your concerns, that is one way you can make that happen. So that's my one tip. Second tip is find an ally, but like white allies are great in an organization. And I've had really good experiences with white allies in organizations. So if there is someone in your organization that you trust and you feel like, they are a true ally, not that they claim that they're an ally, but they are an ally, let them use their privilege to support you, to help you claim some of that power, to claim some of that space, and maybe even help you with voicing some of your concerns with HR, voicing some of your concerns with management. If in the meetings you feel like you're constantly being talked over, guess what? This is where your white ally can support you in claiming the platform and gently handing it back. So that's another tip I would have. And then finally, going back to HR, procedurally, like if you have any concerns, definitely go to your HR representative, but go with all your concerns and all your quote unquote evidence, like any emails, printouts, anything that you can organize ahead of time, agendas, and just really go into the meeting with the seriousness. So your concern can be handled with that same seriousness. And then I would say after the meeting with HR, I would absolutely follow it with an email to the HR with a subject that says confidential, outlining what the conversation was, and I would BCC it to my own personal email address, so I have a copy as well too. And I would end the email saying, is there anything I misunderstood? Just to make sure that there is no misunderstanding between the HR person and the individual that has concerns at the moment. And if there is anything, they can address it at that moment before it goes any further. And that is a crucial way to handle risk at that point. Like, go to your HR, take your concerns, but definitely make sure you're going in prepared and you're taking your meetings with your HR seriously. And that will signal to them that that is a legitimate, serious concern. And make sure that you have your email backup and you have any concerns or any misunderstandings in that email, just in case, that can be addressed immediately. So those are my 3 tips.
You know what? That was excellent, Lucic. I did not want to interrupt you once. If you're watching, I hope you had pen and paper. If you're checking us out on replay, rewind and write those things down, because basically Lucic just gave us a self-empowerment 101 handbook and how to move forward. Number one, if you're not being represented, to collect yourself into community so that you have connections and power within your group. Number two, find a advocate and an ally who can speak for you and with you and help you navigate those circumstances. And number three, if you do happen to be someone who's having an issue where you are in trouble, documentation, preparation, so that you can be taken seriously when you do go to your wonderful HR department and hopefully find a George or a Tony. George, what else can be done? Did we leave anything out? Is there a practical tip that you want to add?
I think leveraging your voice. I think whether, as an employee, if you do not speak, your issues will never get addressed. And if you don't speak to your supervisor first before you go to HR, your issues will never get addressed. And I'll tell you why. Because HR, as a whole, HR has the capacity to address issues, but they still have to work with management because they represent the organization. And the first thing any HR office will always tell you is, did you talk to your supervisor? Did you work it out with your supervisor first? Whatever the issue is, did you bring it to your supervisor first to make them aware of it? And a lot of people, they do a beeline straight to HR when they have a problem with their supervisor, and they never give the supervisor an opportunity to fix it. Sometimes the supervisor's awareness could just be out the window and they didn't even pay attention to it. Something as simple as, hey, you and I were walking out the door and you didn't hold the door for me and it slammed me in my face. And that was so disrespectful and rude. Whereas the supervisor's walking out the door on the phone trying to address an issue, not even noticing that you're behind them. And so what could be a big issue by going to HR and saying I was disrespected by my supervisor because he slammed the door on me, because something as easy as just having a communication with the supervisor and say, hey, when we walked out the door slammed on my face. You didn't even say sorry. And they could just turn around and say, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were there. My apologies, and move on. And so a lot of things is taking our individual accountability for the things that we do. A lot of times we want to blame the supervisor, blame the manager. But if we read the employee handbook, if we read our policies and procedures, if we read what was there, if we made sure that our supervisors are spending time with us, and when they're not holding them accountable, then, when we have problems, we can turn around and say, we did our part. But if you've never done any of those things and you position yourself to receive things and you don't get them and you don't raise your voice and you don't say anything and something goes wrong, well, yeah, the problem is the company, but it's also you as an individual as well. Because as much as you signed the dotted line on that job description and you signed the dotted line on that credit card and you signed the dotted line on that lease, it is your responsibility to make sure that what's on there is you're being held accountable to. And if you're not getting the resources, that you're raising your voice and doing that. Because you can't sign a credit card and not pay the bill after you use the card. There's no way.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's how you get good credit.
But I hope I hope that in the bigger picture, like a lot of people just don't realize that as much as organizations are doing the DEI and this and policies and all that, I want to make sure that people get it. It starts with us first. It starts with me as the employee. You are empowered. If you don't take those steps to communicate to your supervisor, how are you going to get things resolved? Good or bad organization, it starts with you first.
I absolutely love it, George, because you will have the same problem from organization to organization to organization if you walk around with weak self-operating policies. You must be a leader of one first. Tony, I want to get you in here on this conversation. Do you have any tips or anything that you want to add to these notes that our team has offered?
Well, I can tell you they summed it up perfectly for me. Definitely the communication piece it's so important. And as George said, you'll see employees immediately do a beeline for HR. And with HR and DE&I specialists, we're technically sitting at the forefront of Cat 5 hurricanes is the way I like to explain it. Like there's just so much going on. And I think it starts with the re-education of those first line supervisors and understanding, yes, we have an open door policy, but still these things are in place so that we can prevent miscommunication, or we can prevent things that are taken away from us being able to deal with even bigger issues, or not even dealing with them, but being more proactive so that these things don't exist. Lucy gave a very great example about, one of my favorite sayings is, your documentation is your foundation. So you document, you go through it, and you don't have to wait until you have this big journal of everything and say, aha, here we go. But you make sure, if you have a conversation with your direct supervisor and they blow you off, you write that down. This is the day that I spoke to you about X, Y, and Z. If you ask to go to speak to HR and that's denied, you write that stuff down, and you keep it, because this is a part of raising your voice. And when things like that happen, we have to think about, in the DE&I space, we call those microaggressions. Those are microaggressions to keep you suppressed. So excellent points from both of you. The biggest thing that I can say, as I work with these Fortune 500 companies, we have a long way to go, because open door policy truly isn't the open door policy. And we want to blame HR, we want to blame DE&I, we want to blame our first line supervisors, but we never look in the mirror to see, at what point could I have mitigated some of these things? And that's important. That's a part of empowerment. But on the other hand of that, I want to truly, I want to be transparent and say that the environment, again, you're not going to get a George, right? You're not going to get a Lucy, but the environment has conditioned us to suppress our voice. And now more than ever, we have the ability to be able to speak up, raise our voice, raise our argument, and put things into action. And again, all it takes is one long nut to get momentum going, and we're there. So I would say we are a fourth there, but we're going to get there.
Excellent. Now, I have heard wonderful do's from Tony, wonderful do's from Lucic, and wonderful do's from George. But I am going to give you the don't. I'm going to tell you what you don't do. What you don't do is sit around and join the team of complainers. That is what you do not do. Do not sit around and badmouth your supervisor or the HR department or other people in the department. If you have the ability to spot the problem, you have the ability to create change. So let's just pretend. Let's pretend that you have a boss that is absolutely insensitive. They make racial jokes when they shouldn't make racial jokes, or just absolutely, they have absolutely rude behavior, or they do something gentle like leave people out or let the door slam in people's face. Okay, if you can manage to muster up the energy and be brave to say, he's going to be Tom today. Tom, I noticed that you typically leave XYZ people off the interview, off the email when you have after 5 meetings, or when we have happy hours. You know what? Let me do this for you. Let me schedule the happy hours for you so that I can make sure everyone in the department is included. I want to take that off your plate. Very easy. And so instead of coming to your boss with a complaint, come to your boss with a solution, because nobody wants more work. Everybody's looking for a helping hand. And when you do that for your boss, what you've done is send a clear message that I am part of your success and I am part of your team. And there's nothing like having a boss that is also your ally. I know you guys have more to add with that. George, I'm going to go to you.
Well, that right there says it in a nutshell, Erica. I ain't got to say much behind that. The reality is, like, how many times No, I think that's it as far as like empowering employees, like Lucid mentioned, and Tony and you mentioned. At the end of the day, like we are all individual advocates for the things that we want to have happen. We pump our own train, and if we have problems with addressing even the smallest things, then they do become microaggression because people interpret those actions as you being intentional and deliberate. And that might be the case. But if you don't take the steps to even address that question or that issue, or even come up with a solution to resolve that problem that you see visible, then what you tend to do is you become a part of the problem. You're no longer a part of the solution. And I would prefer people be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution and not the problem. But here, I'm with you, Erica. That's fine. I was taught that from the very first time I walked into my first job. Don't come to me without a solution. Come to me, you got a problem, come up with a solution. Now, if you don't accept my solution, then come up with an alternative because I have now raised the problem that we need to address. And most people don't really want to address problems because it is more work. But isn't that what we do, right? I mean, even in our personal lives, if we have issues, we communicate. If we have problems with stuff, we talk about it. We don't just let a problem fester because it messes with our personal psyche and our whole spiritual sense of things. So why not do the same thing at work? Why not be an ally, have your ally partnered with you, identify your allies, have them partner with you as you address issues versus putting them on the outskirts because you become, and I hate to coin this phrase, the angry black man or the angry black woman in the room. So I ain't gonna talk to you no more. Or she doesn't understand me because her culture is so different, so I ain't gonna talk to you no more. Or anytime you got something to say, I don't want to hear it because you're just bringing me problems versus giving me solutions. You've got to go in internally and check yourself and self-regulate to listen what people are saying and weed through all the other emotional nonsense that comes through so you can get to the facts and really address the issue, or weed through all that emotional nonsense so you can present the fact without it being wrapped up in all of your own personal baggage. Ooh.
I absolutely. Wait a minute. You had more to say. What mic drop? Is that what we're doing? There we go. There we go. Okay. As we wrap up here, I do want to add this particular idea. Lucic said that you should, get allies and create a group. And then I'm going to match this with George's idea. Maybe one of the first things you want to do while you're in that group is go over the employee handbook. How about that for the first activity? Okay. Lucic, did you have any parting words that you want to give the group?
I want to just make sure that the advice that we're giving today is not only applicable to people that are like in their 30s and above that have been working for many years, but also might be applicable to the 19-year-old that might have gotten their job for the first time ever and is now having to self-advocate, and they never got those tools and they don't know how to give feedback. So talking about to those folks, one tip I have for you when it comes to working with a manager or supervisor, set the boundary with the manager like from the beginning, which is having one-on-one space or having weekly meetings or bi-weekly or monthly, whatever it is, that you have one agenda every single time, specific space that's just for feedback from manager to you and from you to the manager. So that means you have to give them feedback. They have to give you feedback. So it doesn't make you the bad guy necessarily, because it's just part of your normal procedure to give your supervisor a feedback of certain things they can do to improve or to make that relationship better, as opposed to just, dreading going to your supervisor or your manager or whoever you're reporting to and being like, oh my gosh, like I need to now set up this meeting and I need to have this conversation and I don't know how to give feedback, because that's a whole skill, right? And we've learned that by experiencing it. But I think one way to go around it is just making it a natural process of your meetings with your supervisor. So no one is the bad guy because it's a two-way street. Both people have to give each other feedback of improvement. Maybe you're only doing it once a month for that feedback. Maybe it's a sandwich style where good, it needs improvement, another great thing that you're doing. There's different styles and you can actually find great templates on it online. So this is just a little thing to make it a little bit easier on you if you're not used to that feedback process of it.
Very nice. Very nice, Lucic. Very nice. What are your parting words, Tony?
My parting words is I think from anything, I want people to remember that DE&I, it's a behavior and not a feeling. And it's a behavior that creates a feeling. So the more that people can understand that, the better that we can move forward with that. And just secondly, I want to talk about, as you spoke about, Tom going into the manager's office and kind of removing those microaggressions. And those are systemic microaggressions that are institutionalized in many corporations around America. So just like those are institutionalized, I think then that we should have systemic, tangible results that help to remove those microaggressions. And what you just did, or the information you just gave, is a perfect example of how to do that. Because what that is going to do is open Tom's boss's eyes, hopefully, and make him wake up and say, wow, okay, if he noticed that, how many more of my employees have noticed that, and curb that behavior? And, and hopefully, if Tom doesn't curb that behavior, Tom realizes that maybe this isn't the organization for me anymore because things are changing and the cavalry is home. So those are my parting words.
I love it. Thank you. I hope everyone had a pencil and a piece of paper while watching this, because these are practical strategies that you can implement immediately to help change you and your organization for the better. Thank you once again for watching Epic Understanding.